Welcome back to Diplomacy and International Relations by Bastian Freiburg. Quick note before we begin. This podcast is AI generated, but um, everything you hear is fact-checked by Bastian Freiburg himself.
Yeah.
Today, we're diving into Danish trade with India, a relationship that, honestly,
Yeah.
might surprise you with, its depth and complexity.
Yeah, it's fascinating how often these seemingly quiet corners of international relations get overlooked,
Oh,
And India is increasingly prominent on the global stage. And for anyone who's um, really into Danish politics, understanding this trade relationship, it provides a unique window into how Denmark is positioning itself, within this shifting landscape.
let's unpack this. We hear a lot about India's economic rise, but
Yeah.
what does that actually look like, from a Danish perspective?
Well, in 2023, India was Denmark's 22nd largest export market, so not top 10,
Yeah.
sure, but that still translates to a substantial 18.2 billion Danish kroner. What's really intriguing, though, is that this isn't just about shipping goods back and
So
forth.
you're saying there's more to it than just like
Right.
Lego bricks heading to Mumbai?
Yeah. Exactly. When we look closer, we see that India was Denmark's 31st largest market for goods, but then jumped all the way to 15th for services. So that means services alone made up a whopping 12.9 billion kroner of that trade. This tells us that Danish expertise, especially in areas like pharmaceuticals, finance, and consulting, is in high demand in India.
So even though we may not think of Denmark and India as like natural trading partners, there's this sophisticated exchange happening kind of beneath the surface. And you mentioned something earlier about a shift in the landscape. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so overall trade dipped a bit in 2023. The first 7 months of 2024 show a serious rebound. Exports specifically surged by 21.5% compared to the same period last year. So that suggests that this partnership is not only surviving, it's actively evolving.
That's quite a jump. This makes me want to peek inside that trade basket you mentioned. What are the actual products driving these numbers?
Well, on the Danish side, medicinal and pharmaceutical products are the heavy hitters. In 2023, those exports alone raked in 853.9 million kroner. Machinery and industrial accessories are also significant at 732 million. Interestingly, though, there's been a noticeable decline in exports of metal, ores, and scrap metal.
So high-tech and specialized goods are leading the way, while more basic materials are falling behind. What about the goods coming in from India? Is it what we might expect?
Well, clothing and accessories top the list for imports, reaching 1.63 billion kroner in 2023. This kind of hints at a pattern playing out on a global scale. Denmark, like many developed economies, is focusing on knowledge-intensive industries and high-value exports, while relying on imports for things that can be manufactured more cost-effectively elsewhere.
That makes sense, but it also raises questions about, the long-term implications for the Danish economy. Is this reliance on specialized exports sustainable? What happens if the global demand for those products shifts?
These are crucial questions, and there's no easy answer. But let's not lose sight of the investment side of the equation. Danish companies aren't just trading with India, they're putting down roots. At the end of 2022, direct Danish investment in India reached 11.7 billion kroner.
Serious commitment. What does that look like on the ground?
We're talking about 192 Danish subsidiaries operating in India, employing nearly 100,000 people. This signals a belief in the long-term potential of the Indian market.
So it's not just about short-term profits from exports. It's about building lasting partnerships and creating opportunities in a rapidly growing economy. But India's growth isn't happening in isolation. How does this all fit into the bigger picture of global geopolitics? What are the potential implications for Denmark's role in the world?
That's where things get really interesting, and it's what we'll explore next.
Yeah, India's rise as a global power is something we simply can't ignore, especially when considering Danish foreign policy. It presents both opportunities and challenges, and understanding those nuances is critical. You're right, it's easy to get caught up in the economic figures and miss the bigger picture. So for our listeners who are interested in international relations, help us connect those dots. What makes this relationship so significant beyond just the trade numbers?
Well, consider this. India is a key player in a whole host of international organizations. We're talking about the G20, the BRICS group of emerging economies, and of course, their increasingly prominent role at the United Nations. As India's influence grows within these organizations, their bilateral relationships, including the one with Denmark, become even more strategically important.
As Denmark, with its long history of diplomacy and international cooperation, could actually play a significant role in bridging gaps between India and other nations.
Precisely. Denmark has a strong reputation for being a reliable and principled partner. They could be instrumental in facilitating dialogue and building consensus. particularly within the European Union.
That makes me think about Denmark's expertise in conflict resolution and humanitarian aid as well. Wouldn't that be valuable in addressing some of the regional challenges India faces?
Absolutely. Think about the ongoing tensions between India and Pakistan, or the complex dynamics in the South China Sea. Denmark's experience in mediating disputes and promoting peaceful dialogue could be a real asset in those situations.
So we're seeing how this seemingly straightforward trade relationship between Denmark and India actually has these ripple effects across the global political landscape. It begs the question, what steps could both countries take to further strengthen their ties and navigate these complexities?
One key area is people-to-people exchanges. Increasing educational and cultural exchanges between Denmark and India would foster greater understanding and build stronger bonds between the two societies.
I imagine those kinds of exchanges could spark innovation and collaboration in unexpected ways, right? Getting different perspectives in the same room can often lead to breakthroughs.
Exactly. And that leads to another important area, collaboration on research and development, particularly in fields like renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and healthcare. Both Denmark and India are making significant strides in those areas. And there's so much potential for sharing knowledge and expertise.
It sounds like a win-win situation.
Yeah.
Joint ventures and partnerships between Danish and Indian companies could benefit both economies while addressing global challenges. But let's be realistic. It's not all smooth sailing. What are some of the hurdles that could stand in the way of closer ties?
Navigating the complexities of India's political system is a key challenge. It's a vibrant democracy with diverse interests and perspectives, which can sometimes make decision-making processes more intricate.
And, of course, we can't forget about the cultural differences that might lead to misunderstandings or communication barriers. Building trust and rapport takes time and effort.
That's why investing in building relationships and fostering a deep understanding of each other's cultures and perspectives is crucial.
It all comes back to open communication, a willingness to learn, and a commitment to finding common ground. Before we move on, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about Denmark's reputation for upholding core values like human rights and democracy. How does that play into its relationship with India?
That's an essential point. As Denmark engages with India, it's vital to uphold its commitment to those values. It's about finding that balance where economic growth and ethical considerations go hand in hand.
So promoting those values doesn't have to be at odds with pursuing economic and strategic interests. In fact, working together could lead to more sustainable and ethical solutions in the long run.
Absolutely. It requires a nuanced understanding of the complexities of the relationship and a commitment to open and honest dialogue. And that's what makes these kinds of discussions so important. We can't shy away from the challenges, but we also need to recognize the incredible potential for positive collaboration.
This has been such an enlightening conversation. We've covered a lot of ground, from specific trade figures to the broader implications for global politics. What are some of the key takeaways you hope our listeners will walk away with?
I hope they come away with a deeper appreciation for the growing significance of India on the global stage and how that impacts Denmark's foreign policy objectives. This relationship is multifaceted, going far beyond just economics. It touches on diplomacy, culture, even security considerations.
It seems like this deep dive has revealed connections we might not have considered before. What final thoughts would you leave our listeners with as we wrap up this part of the discussion?
Well, I think the key takeaway is that while there are undoubtedly challenges to navigate, there are also immense opportunities for collaboration and mutual benefit between Denmark and India. This isn't a zero-sum game. Both countries can gain from a stronger partnership.
And it seems like finding that sweet spot, where both countries thrive while upholding those core values, requires a deep understanding of each other's perspectives and a genuine commitment to open dialogue.
Absolutely. And that's where things get really interesting for anyone following Danish politics. How does a nation like Denmark, with its specific strengths and values, position itself to be a truly valuable partner to a rising power like India? It's a complex question with no easy answers.
This has been an incredible deep dive, and I feel like we've only just scratched the surface. But we do have to wrap things up. For our listeners who are now eager to learn more, what are some key areas they could explore further?
Well, I'd encourage them to look beyond the headlines and delve deeper into the specific sectors where Danish expertise aligns with India's needs. Renewable energy, sustainable urban development, healthcare innovation. These are just a few areas ripe for collaboration.
And from a political science perspective, it would be fascinating to examine how Denmark navigates its relationships with both India and the European Union. There's a lot of potential for Denmark to act as a bridge between these two key players on the global stage.
Exactly. It's a delicate balancing act, but one that highlights Denmark's unique position and influence.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Danish trade with India, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought-provoking question to consider. As India's global influence continues to grow, how can Denmark leverage its expertise and values to be not just a successful trading partner, but a true force for positive change in the world?
That's a question worth pondering, not just for those interested in Danish or Indian politics, but for anyone invested in building a more sustainable and equitable future. It's a conversation that needs to happen on multiple levels, from government policies to individual actions, and hopefully, this deep dive has given our listeners some valuable insights. To contribute to that ongoing dialogue,